11 days before his wedding, the Alpha King reads 14 words on a grey hawk and rides through a storm to a woman he was never supposed to see, a brutal wolf of kingdom, a bride sharpening poison behind marble walls, a blood oath sworn under a white oak 42 years ago, and a maid sleeping in a linen closet, hiding a name his father once ordered erased. He kneels, lays his father's sword in her hands. She pushes the blade to the floor. A poisoned wedding cup, a cancelled crown, an old wolf stepping in front of a bolt, castles burning, rival queens watching, a silver circlet forged from his father's steel. I do not want your blood. I want the throat still pouring. The rain came sideways over the northern moor. It hit the road so hard the water bounced twice off the stone, and through it one man on one's horse, alone, no banner, no herald, no torch, riding faster than any messenger had ridden that road in a decade. He was 34 years old. He was Alpha King Draven Wolfsbane, and in 11 days he was going to marry a woman he had never once wanted. The wedding contracts were already sealed. Every warlord from the Frostwater coast to the Silver Passes had already sent his acceptance. Merchants had tripled the price of white silk. Bards had written songs about the union of Wolfsbane and Ashcroft, songs full of clean rhymes about crowns and dawns and destinies. The songs sounded, if you listened hard, exactly like coins, because that was what the wedding was. Coins, not love, not fate, not even the crude, honest thing under love, which was hunger, just coins. Draven pulled the reins hard, and his war stallion slowed. Rain ran down the back of his cuirass, spat down his spine into the small of his back where the cold sat and did not move. He should have been asleep in the summer palace at Caprivale, 5 days south, in a wing full of marble gardens where his bride-to-be walked with her handmaids and her poisons. Instead, he was on a road he had left 3 weeks ago, riding back to a keep that had not asked for him. Because of a message that had said 14 words, the message had come at dusk, on a grey hawk, Ironmoor seal. Only one man in the Dungeon set hawks with that seal without asking permission first. His name was Captain Aldrich Thorne. He was 68 years old. He had served Draven's father before Draven had been old enough to hold a sword. He had never once, in Draven's living memory, sent a hawk over a servant. The message had said, "The maid in the west wing, Nara, 3 nights sleeping in the linen closet at my king." Something is wrong, that was all. Draven had read the message twice. He had walked into the war tent. He had told his generals he was riding back to Ironmoor on personal business. He had left 3 war councils and 1 bride-to-be waiting. He had not asked himself why, because there are things a man does not ask himself while he is doing them. He does them, and then on the road, at midnight in the rain, he lets the question rise. And this was the question rising now, in the small of his back where the cold sat. For a maid, why? For a hawk that says it's only 14 words, because Aldrich Thorne did not send hawks lightly, because Aldrich Thorne did not use the word wrong the way other men used it, and because there was, and he admitted it only to himself, on that road, in that rain, because he had noticed her once, 12 months ago, in a corridor, carrying a linen basket, and he had looked at her for the length of one breath. He had looked away, and he had not thought of her again with any part of his mind that would answer to being asked. But some other part had. Some part had, apparently, been keeping a small, careful ledger for 12 months, and tonight the ledger had been called in, and Draven was riding. The keep rose ahead of him through the storm. Black stone, 12 towers, torches burning in iron cages along the wall, the light chewed thin by rain. Ironmoor was not a beautiful place. Ironmoor was a place that had refused to fall for 400 years. His grandfather had built it. His father had bled in it. His mother had died in it, on a morning nobody spoke of. The gates opened before he reached them. Because the gate wolves knew his scent from a mile off. Because Aldrich Thorne had left standing orders that the king rode home tonight and no horn was to be blown, Draven passed under the portcullises without a word. A stable boy took his stallion. Another boy took his cloak. Neither dared look at his face. Good, Aldrich was waiting in the inner ward under the eaves of the armory, out of the rain but not out of the cold, 68 years old, and still standing like a spear planted in the earth. Grey hair cropped to the scalp, grey beard that had once been red, grey cloak pinned at the shoulder with a wolf head brooch older than the man wearing it. The two men looked at each other for a long moment. Neither spoke first. Then, "She is still here, kitchen, west passage. Alone you watched her, I watched the corridor. There is a difference. Aldrich, my king, why did you send the hawk?" The old man did not answer at once. His pale grey eyes moved past Draven to some place that was not the courtyard and not the present. And for the first time in 15 years of service, Draven saw something in Aldrich Thorn he could not name, not fear. Aldrich did not fear. "Something older than fear, my king. I have watched that girl for a year. And there is a thing I have been meaning to tell you, but I would like you to see her first before I say it. So that you see her, and not the thing I say, that is not an answer, no. It is not." Draven let the silence hang. He had learned young that silence, correctly used, was a sharper blade than steel. Most men, given enough silence, would say anything. Aldrich Thorn said nothing. He stood in his grey cloak with his hands folded at his belt and gave the king the same silence back, which was the answer, if Draven was willing to read it. "The West Passage. Yes, my king. Alone. Yes, you will wait in the North Hall. When I come out, you will tell me the rest." "Yes, my king." Draven walked past him, whatever it was in his chest that had been sleeping badly for 6 nights. It did not sleep now. It sat up. It listened. And it waited, without a growl and without a name, for the door at the end of the West Passage to open. The kitchens of Ironmore Keep were built like a small cathedral cathedral, stone vaults overhead, hearths tall enough to roast a whole boar, copper kettles on iron hooks, long tables of scarred oak where 4 generations of cooks had chopped and kneaded and bled. At 2:47 in the morning, the kitchens should have been empty. The night cook slept in a room by the pantry. The scullery boys slept above the ovens. The fires were banked. The lanterns were out, but there was a light, a single tallow candle, on the flagstones, near the base of the great cold well where the milk and cheese were kept. Beside the candle, on the floor, was a woman. Draven stopped in the archway. He did not step in. He stood in the shadow of the stone lintel and he looked. She was small, not fragile, small the way a whetstone is small, compact, purposeful, made to be gripped. 26 years old, he had been told once in passing by Stuarsfjord. She looked older tonight and younger tonight, both at once, the way people look when they have been crying for a long time in the dark. Her hair was dark, pulled up in a messy knot with a strip of grey wool. She wore an oversized wool sweater that came down past her hips and thin homespun trousers mended at both knees. Her feet were bare on the cold flagstone. She had a wooden bowl in her lap. Barley soup, cold, congealed. She had not eaten more than 3 teaspoonfuls. The rest sat there, thickening, and she stared at it like it was the last honest thing left in the world. In her right hand she held a small polished disc of dark glass framed in bronze. A speaking mirror, the old kind. Traders sold them for a month's wages in the market at Frostwater. She held it low, near her hip, and she was whispering into it in the plain northern tongue of the border villages, the accent of Hollow Glen, where the vowels ran long and the consonants softened at the edges. Draven understood every word. He had been trained in 7 tongues by the age of 12. His father had believed a king who did not understand a soldier's mother tongue could not command that soldier's death. It was one of the few things his father had believed that had turned out to be true. The voice in the mirror was young, younger than the woman on the floor, a woman's voice all the same, not a girl's, Nara. "Please, you have to come home. The healer says 2 weeks, no more. If we cannot pay the Moon Witch by the 2nd full moon, Mother's spine will lock. She will never walk again. She will never sit up again. She will lie in that bed until the Marrowhang gives out." The woman on the floor closed her eyes. She did not answer at once. When she did, her voice was so quiet, Draven had to lean into the archway to catch it. "Isala, I know, Nara. 400 gold. 400. Where am I going to find 400 gold in a fortnight? Papa sold the mule. Papa sold his workbench. Papa sold his father's carving knives. There is nothing left in this house to sell. Nothing I know. I sit with her. I turn her every 3 hours so the sores do not grow. I sing her mama's old songs. She does not open her eyes for me anymore, Nara. She only opens them when I say your name. The woman on the floor pressed the heel of her free hand against her mouth. Hard. Like she was holding something in with the pressure of her palm. And if she let go, it would come out and it would never stop. Ah, Nara. Are you eating? Yes, Nara, yes. I am eating. You are lying to me. I hear it in your throat. The woman on the floor opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out, Isla. Listen. I have 3 trades. The keep by day, the tavern at the harbour by evening, the bleaching sheds by dawn. 3 trades. Little sister, I sleep 4 hours. I have not bought a new pair of shoes in 11 months. I send every coin home. Every coin. There is nothing more I can send. There is nothing more of me to send. The mirror was silent for a long time then. Very small, Nara. Ask him. The woman on the floor went completely still. Ask who? Him, the king. You clean his roosms. You wash his linen. You told me once he has more gold in one chest than our whole village will see in 100 years. Ask him. I will not. He is a wolf, Nara. Wolves protect what is under their roof. He is the kind of wolf who eats what is under his roof, Isla. You do not know that. I know that men with that much power did not gather it by kindness. I know what the men in the corridor carry on their belts. I know what the visitors who come at midnight are. I am not a stupid country girl anymore. I have been in this keep for 1 year. I have kept my head down and my mouth shut and my hands invisible for 1 year. If I go to him now with a broken bowl and a broken mother and I ask him for 400 gold, do you know what happens? What? I become his, in one way or another, and whatever piece of me I still own that has not been sold to a keep or a tavern or a bleaching shed, that piece becomes his too. And when he is done with that piece, he will discard it, and I will have nothing. Not even the pretending, Nara. I am hanging on to the pretending, Isla. Do not ask me to trade the pretending for 400 gold. Mother is dying, I know. Mother is dying, Nara, I know. The woman on the floor did not sob. She did not wail. What she did was worse. She bent forward at the waist, over the cold soup, and her whole body shook the way a tree shakes in a storm that has already broken the tallest branches and is just working on the trunk. Now, methodical, patient, without pity, she did not make a sound, not one. That was what undid him. Draven Wolfsbane had killed a man at 15. He had ordered the killing of 100 more before he was 20. He had sat across a war table from the Frost End King himself and eaten venison while they haggled over the lives of border villagers. He had watched a woman burn in the Silver Passes for the crime of being married to the wrong beta. He had not looked away then. He had not looked away from any of it. But this, a woman on the stone floor of his own kitchen, crying so quietly the candle flame did not move. This unmade him. He stood in the archway, and something in his chest that had been locked shut for 22 years pushed once against the door of its cage. Not loud, not violent, just a single patient shove, as if to say, I am still in here. Did you forget? He had forgotten. He stepped forward. The flagstone under his boot made the smallest sound. A grain of grit, a scrape, not even a footfall, she heard. She was up in an instant, not gracefully, not slow-see. She came off the floor the way a rabbit comes out of a snare, wild and wrong-limbed and completely certain that whatever was in the room with her was going to kill her. The bowl went sideways. The soup slid across the flagstone in a slow grey wave. The mirror clattered against the base of the cold well, and the small voice inside it cried, Nara, Nara, what was that? She had her back to the stone wall in 2 heartbeats. Her hands were open at her sides, empty. She was not reaching for a knife. She was not reaching for a candlestick to swing. She stood very straight with her palms open and her chin up, and Draven understood in a single cold flash that this was the posture of a woman who had decided that if she was going to be struck, she would be struck standing. Not on her knees, standing. He stopped in the middle of the kitchen. He kept his hands out where she could see them. He did not step closer. She saw him. The color drained out of her face so fast he thought for a moment she might faint. She did not. What she did was worse. She lowered herself into a low, formal curtsy, The kind taught to servant girls on their first day. The kind that said, "Please and I am nothing, and do not harm me all at once." She kept her eyes on the flagstone. My king. Her voice was steady. That was what he could not stop hearing later. Not the curtsy, not the fear. The steadiness of her voice. Rise, she rose. She did not look up. Look at me. A pause. Then her eyes came up. Dark. Brown, so deep the candle in them looked like it was burning at the bottom of a well. He had seen those eyes across 100 corridors in the last 12 months, serving a tray, carrying a basin, passing in a doorway. He had never once looked at them. He had looked at the tray. He had looked at the basin. He had looked at the doorway, not the eyes. Something in him made a small, private sound. Not aloud, only where he could hear it. And he understood, without needing to name it, that whatever had been asleep in him for 22 years had woken up in this kitchen. And it was not going to lie back down. He did not let any of that show on his face. You are Nara. Yes, my king. Nara Vale, my king, Nara Vale. From Hollow Glen, Vale, he heard the name, and something in the back of his skull went very quiet, as if a listener he had not known was there had leaned forward. Vale. He had heard that name before, not recently, a long time ago, in the mouth of his father. And his father had been angry. He filed it. He looked at her. You are barefoot on my kitchen floor at 3 in the morning? Yes. My king, you are eating cold soup out of a bowl on the flagstones. Yes, my king, you have been sleeping in the linen closet for 3 nights. Her chin came up a fraction, just a fraction, but it came up. Yes, my king. You did not tell the steward. No, my king. Why? She did not answer. He gave her the silence. Nara Vale gave him nothing back. Not an excuse, not a plea, not a sob, not a shrug, just the steady, exhausted eyes of a woman who had already survived worse than him. Drevin crossed the kitchen, slowly, so she could see every step. He stopped 3 paces from her, close enough that she could smell the rain in his cloak, not close enough to loom. Sit down, Nara Vale, my king. Sit. He turned before she could argue. He pulled a low 3-legged stool from beside the great hearth. He set it on the flagstone between them. He took a second stool. He sat. He did not sit like a king. He sat like a man, elbows on knees, shoulders forward, his grey eyes level with hers. She looked at the stool. She looked at him. She sat. She sat because her legs would not hold her any longer, and she was too proud to let him see her fall. He gave her that, too. He picked up the speaking mirror from where it had rolled against the base of the cold well. The little voice beside it was silent now. The connection had gone dark. He turned the mirror in his hand, bronze frame, northern make. Cheap silvering already spotted at the edges. 12 gold pieces at market, maybe 15. It was, he realized, almost certainly the most valuable thing she owned. He set it gently on the flagstone between them, glass down, so that she could pick it up without asking. She did not pick it up. She watched his hands. Your mother is sick, he said. She did not answer. 400 gold to the moon witch of Hollow Glen. Before the second full moon, her lip parted. No sound came out. You have been listening to me through the wall, my king. No, I have been standing in the archway for less than the space of 1 prayer. I heard what I heard. I did not cease it. Then how? You told me, just now. And I have ears. She looked away. He saw the color rise in her throat. Shame. Not the shame of a servant caught with a bowl of soup. The shame of a proud woman who had been overheard in her worst hour by the last man in the world she wanted to overhear her. He watched it. He did not enjoy it. He filed it, the way he filed everything, and moved on. I will pay it. Her head came up like he had struck her. No, Nara, no. 400 gold is, I said, no, my king. She was on her feet again, not standing, rising. From the stool, slow, controlled. The way a soldier rises when a superior officer has said something that must be answered, but cannot be answered while seated. He did not move. He looked up at her from the stool. He let her have the higher ground. She was shaking. He could see it in the fine bones of her wrist's pulse, under her jaw. Shaking and still speaking clearly. My king, I am very grateful, I am. My mother would kiss the hem of your cloak. My sister would name a child for you. But I cannot take it. Why? Because I know what you are. The words landed in the kitchen like a hammer on an anvil. Once. Loud, and then the ringing after. He did not flinch. "Say what you mean." "I have served in this keep for 12 months, my king. I have washed the blood out of your linen. I have polished the boots you wore into the passes. I have carried trays past the door of your war chamber when the door was not fully closed. I know what men with your reach take back from the world when they give something to it. I know what 400 gold buys from a girl like me, and I know that whatever piece of me is still my own tonight, I will not sell it. Not for 400 gold, not for 4,000, not for my mother." He looked at her. There was something in his chest doing something it had not done in a very long time. It was not, he thought carefully, love. He did not know love. It was something more embarrassing. It was recognition. He recognized her. Not her face, not her name, the thing under her ribs. The thing that had made her sit down on the cold floor with a bowl of soup at 3 in the morning and refuse to sell it. He had that same thing. It was smaller in him than it was in her. It had been starved longer. But it was the same thing. "Nara Vale, my king, tell me about your father." Her whole body went cold. He watched it happen. He watched the small hairs stand up along her forearms, watched the pupils in those deep brown eyes go wide and then narrow, watched the breath in her chest stop and start again. "Why? Because you told me your name is Vale, and I have heard that name before in this keep, out of the mouth of my father, and it was not spoken kindly, and I would like to know why." She was silent for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, "My father was Alpha Corvin Vale of Hollow Glen. He was a good man. He was a fair man. He was the second cousin of your father, twice removed. He was executed on the front steps of this keep 20 years ago, on the order of your father, for the crime of treason. He was not a traitor. He was not given a trial. He was not given the chance to name a champion. He was walked out of the gate you rode through tonight, and his head was struck off in front of a crowd of merchants and children, and his body was thrown into the moat, and his lands were burned, and his wife, my mother, was told she would live only because widowhood was a crueler punishment than death." She took a breath. "He was 34 years old, my king. The same age you are tonight." Draven did not move. He was still sitting on the stool. His elbows were still on his knees. His face was still, in every visible way, the face he had put on to receive her. Inside his skull, a wall he did not know he had been leaning against for 22 years, cracked from the ceiling to the floor. "I did not know." His own voice sounded strange to him. "No, my king, you would not. You were 14 years old. They do not tell 14-year-old boys about the executions their fathers order at dawn. You have known who I am for 12 months. Yes, you have carried trays past me for 12 months. Yes, you have not once tried to put a knife in me." For the first time since she had risen from the stool, something almost like a smile touched the corner of her mouth. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who had considered a thing carefully and set it down. "No, my king, I have not. Why? Because you are not the man who killed my father, and because my mother is dying and I need this position, and a woman who wants to eat cannot afford to be a woman who wants revenge." He looked at her for a long time. He picked up the speaking mirror from the flagstone. He held it out to her, glass up, in both hands. A formal offering. The way a herald offers a scroll. She took it. Her fingers did not touch his. He rose from the stool. He did not tower. He simply stood, Nara Vale of Hollow Glen, daughter of Alpha Corvin Vale. Hear me. She did not curtsy. She did not lower her eyes. She stood on his flagstones in her wool sweater and her mended trousers and her bare feet, and she looked at her king, and she waited. "I did not know my father had done this. I know it now. What was done to your father cannot be undone by me. His head cannot be put back on his shoulders. His trial cannot be given to him 20 years late. But there is a debt on this house, my house, and that debt is mine, because I am what is left of the house that owes it. So hear me." He paused. He wanted the words clean. The 400 gold is not a gift. It is not charity. It is not payment for any piece of you. It is the first coin of a debt of blood that my father owed your father, and that I inherit tonight, and that I will pay whether you take it or refuse it. If you refuse it, I will send it to Hollow Glen by rider before dawn, and pay the Moon Witch. Your mother will live, and you may go on hating me for the paying of it. That is your right, but the debt is not yours to refuse. The debt is mine to pay." The kitchen was very quiet. The candle on the flagstone guttered once, and then steadied. She looked at him, her mouth opened. Nothing came out. She sat down on the stool again, not because he told her to, because her legs would not hold her. She put the speaking mirror in her lap, and she covered her face with both hands, and for the first time since he had walked into the kitchen, she made a sound, a small sound. A single sharp intake of breath cracked in the middle, a sound like thin ice breaking on a shallow pond. He did not move to her, he did not touch her, he did not offer any word. He simply stood at his end of the kitchen, and he stood guard over her weeping, as if her weeping were a treasury, and he were the sworn sword at its door. When the sound stopped and she took her hands from her face, her eyes were red, but her chin was up again. "My king, yes. If you send her rider before dawn, my mother will live. Yes, and I will owe you nothing, nothing. That is not how the world works. It is how this house will work now." She looked at him for a long moment. "Then send the rider, and I will believe you when I see my sister's face in the mirror, telling me the witch has been paid. That is fair, and my king. Yes, I am not sleeping in the linen closet tonight." The corner of his mouth moved, not a smile, something more careful. "No, Nara Vale, you are not. There is a guest chamber in the east wing. Private door, own hearth, own bath. It is yours until I say otherwise, and I will not say otherwise soon. In the morning you and I will speak again, because there is a great deal I need to understand, and I would rather understand it from you than from a ledger." She nodded once. She rose. She looked at the spilled soup on the flagstones. "I will clean this before I go." "You will not." "My king, Nara." She stopped. "You have washed the floors of this keep for 12 months. You will not wash them tonight." She looked at him. She nodded. She left the kitchen the way she had probably left 100 rooms in her life. Small, silent, bare feet on stone, head down but not bowed, carrying her speaking mirror against her chest like a child. He watched her go. When the sound of some of her feet had faded down the west passage, he stood alone in the kitchen with a spilled bowl of cold soup and a guttering candle. And the first honest thing that had happened to him in 20 years, he walked out into the North Hall. Aldrich Thorne was waiting. The old man stood exactly where Draven had left him. Grey cloak, wolf head brooch, hands folded at his belt. The torches in the North Hall burned low and threw his shadow long and thin across the flagstones. Draven stopped in front of him. For a long moment neither man spoke. Then Draven said, and his voice was quiet, and it was not the voice of a king. It was the voice of the 14-year-old boy who had once stood at a keep window and watched his old father order something in the courtyard below that the boy had been too young to understand. "You knew, yes, my king. You knew who she was when she came to the gate a year ago. Yes, you put her in this keep. You told no one, my king. Not the steward, not the baiter, not you." Why, the old man closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet, but the water did not fall. Aldrich Thorne had not wept since a morning 20 years ago on the front steps of this keep. And he was not going to weep tonight, 'cause I made an oath, my king, on a morning I do not speak of, to a man whose body I helped throw into your moat. And that oath was that if any child of his blood was still alive when I found them, I would bring them under this roof, and I would keep them there until I was certain that the son of the man who killed him had grown into a man who could be told the truth. And, my king, yes, tonight is the first night in 20 years I have been certain. Dreven Wolfsbane, Alpha King of Ironmoor, stood in his own North Hall in the middle of the night, soaked to the skin, and he closed his eyes, because there was a great deal he needed to understand. And he already knew that understanding it was going to cost him a throne, a bride, an alliance, 3 border provinces, and possibly his life. And he already knew, with a certainty older than any oath, that he was going to pay it. Every coin, the rider went out at 4 in the morning. Not 1 rider, 3. Because Draven Wolfsbane did not send a message worth 400 gold on the back of 1 horse and pray, 3 riders, 3 routes, 3 copies of the same scroll, sealed in black wax, bound to the wrist, and under each rider's cloak, a purse heavier than the horse that carried it. Aldrich handed the last purse up in silence, his breath white in the courtyard, the stable boys pretending not to look at the king who had not slept. The riders were gone before the sky turned grey. Draven stood in the wet gravel until the last hoofbeat faded past the outer wall. Then he turned. He walked back into his own keep, and he did not go to his bedchamber. He walked to his study. He shut the door. He sat behind his father's black oak desk. He did not light the lamp. He put his elbows on the desk. He put his face in his hands. Alpha King. 34. 200 banners. 3 ports. A treasury deep enough to buy a small mountain range. And here he was in the dark at 4 in the morning, trying to remember whether his father had smiled the day he ordered a man's head off in the courtyard below. He could not remember. That was the worst of it. He could not remember his father's face on that morning. He could only remember the sound, a crowd, a drum, a single wet impact, and the smell of the moat afterward when they threw the body in. He had been 14. He had stood at his window. He had been told by his tutor that a king did not look away. He had not looked away. He had not asked who, because his father had said, "Wolves do not ask who, wolves ask why, and I have already answered the why. That is enough. That had been enough. For 20 years, it was not enough anymore." At 7 the next morning, Nara Vale came down the west stairs. She wore the same wool sweater and the same mended trousers. She had put on shoes, cloth shoes with holes at the toes. She had washed her face. She had put her hair up with a fresh strip of grey wool. She looked like a woman who had slept for 3 hours out of pride and no more. She walked past the throne hall without looking at it. She walked past the great dining hall without looking at it. She walked into the kitchen, because the kitchen was the only room in the keep where she knew what to do with her hands. The night cook stared at her. 2 scullery boys stared at her. The steward, a thin grey man named Holden, who had run this keep since before Draven was crowned, stared at her longest of all, because Holden had received a note at dawn, in the king's own hand. 3 lines. "The maid Nara Vale is not a servant of this house effective this morning. She is a guest. She takes no orders from you. If she asks for a knife to peel a turnip, you give her the knife. If she asks for the whole kitchen, you give her the kitchen." Holden had read the note 4 times. Then he had walked into the kitchen and stood by the great hearth and waited. When Nara came in, he bowed. She stopped dead. "No, my lady, no. Do not. Holden, do not do that. The king has. I know what the king has. I still say no. I have carried your trays for a year. I have washed your linen. Do not bow at me. I will burn the kitchen down." Holden did not smile. Holden had not smiled in 11 years. Something moved at the corner of his mouth all the same. "As my lady wishes. Get out of my kitchen, Holden." "Yes, my lady." He got out. The scullery boys got out. The night cook, whose name was Peg, and who was 60 years old, and had never taken an order from anyone under 60 in her life, folded her arms across her chest and did not get out. Nara looked at her. Peg looked at Nara. "You are going to cook?" "Yes, you are going to cook for him." "Yes, you are angry." "Yes, good. Angry hands make honest bread. Sit down, eat first, then cook. I will not have a guest of the king fainting into my sourdough." "I am not. You are not what?" "I am not a guest." Pegs had looked at her for a long moment. Peg had cooked for 3 alphas of Ironmore. Pegs had seen a great many women come and go through the West Wing. Peg knew, with the clean certainty of a woman who had spent 40 years, watching men eat exactly what she was looking at. She did not say so. She put down a bowl of hot porridge and a spoon and a mug of small ale. "Then cook, and do not lie to yourself in my kitchen." It soused the yeast. That was how the 7 days began. Draven did not go back to Caprivale. He sent a raven south to the summer court that same morning. The raven carried a message written in the smooth, diplomatic hand he had learned at 15. Border unrest in the northern passes. Bandit incursion at the salt roads. Regrettable delay. 2 weeks at most, which was a lie. Every word of it, because there was no bandit incursion. Because the salt roads were quiet. because in 11 days a bride was waiting for him at the marble gardens of Capri Vale, and he was not going to marry her, and he had not yet decided how he was going to tell her that. He told himself he had 2 weeks to decide. He told himself he needed the 2 weeks to gather intelligence, to handle whatever Aldrich Thorne was about to tell him about Nara Vale, that a year of silence had not been long enough to bury. He told himself all of that, and every morning he came down to the great dining hall at 7, and every morning there was hot bread on the table that had not been there when he was in Capri Vale, and honey butter that had not been there, and eggs coddled the northern way with green onion and cracked pepper. And every morning he ate every bite, and every morning he did not ask who had made it, because he already knew. On the third morning she was there. She was sitting at the far end of the dining table, not at the king's end, not at the servant's end, the middle. In a plain grey dress that Peg had scrounged from somewhere and let out at the hem, her hair was down. She was reading. She was reading a book, his book, from his library, a cracked leather volume of the old northern legends, the ones about the wolves who had learned to speak by eating the moon. He stopped in the doorway. He watched her turn a page. She looked up. They looked at each other across the length of the dining hall. "Good morning, my king. Good morning, Nara Vale. I stole a book, I noticed. I will give it back. You will not. It is yours until you finish it. Then you may steal another," she smiled. It was very small. It was gone almost before it happened, but it happened. And Draven Wolfsbane, 34 years old, ruler of 200 banners and 3 ports, sat down at his own dining table across from a woman reading his book, and did not know what to do with his hands. He picked up a fork. He put it down. He picked it up again. Peg came out of the kitchen with a plate, set it in front of him, did not curtsy, went back to the kitchen. He ate, she read. The silence was not uncomfortable. That was the strangest thing of all. For 34 years, silence in a room with another person had meant one of 2 things to Draven Wolfsbane. It had meant a subordinate was afraid to speak, or it had meant a rival was calculating how to strike. It had not, in any year he could remember, meant simply that 2 people were in a room, and neither one of them needed to fill the air with sound. He ate half the plate before he spoke. "What was your father's workshop like?" She looked up from the book. "You want to know?" "Yes, you are not asking to be polite." "No, why? Because I have been trying to remember his face, and I cannot. And I thought if you told me about his workshop, I might be able to reach him another way." She closed the book. She put both hands flat on the table. There was cedar. There was always cedar. He said cedar was the wood that told the truth. Pine lied. Oak was stubborn. Ash was quick. But cedar told you what it was. It smelled like a summer that had already ended. He carved St. Satans for the moon witches of the mountain shrines. He carved handles for kitchen knives. He carved cradles. He carved one coffin. He carved his own bench. And I sat on that bench from the time I could sit until the day the soldiers came and burned it. You saw it burn, yes. You were 6, yes, you remember. Every summer I remember. Because when the wind comes through the valley from the south, and it hits the burnt clearing where the shop used to be, it still smells like cedar for a week. My father is dead. His shop is dead. But every summer, for 1 week, the mountain still smells like him. Draven set his fork down. He did not pick it up again for a long time. My father taught me to kill a rabbit with a stone when I was 6. He said if I could not do it, I would not eat. I did it. I ate. When I was 9, he taught me to kill a rabbit with my hands. Same rule, same dinner. When I was 12, he sat me down at his desk and he said, "Draven, you are old enough now to feel the first true grief of your life. So I'm going to teach you a trick. Do you want to know the trick?" Nara did not speak. The trick was that if I noticed a feeling rising in my chest that I did not have use for, I was to name it. Then I was to imagine putting it in a small iron box. Then I was to imagine closing the lid of the box. Then I was to imagine burying the box under the floor of my ribs, and I was never to dig it up. Because a king who dug up his boxes was a king who died young. How many boxes? I stopped counting at 40. How old were you? 15. She did not say anything. He looked at his plate. "I am sitting across from you. and there is a crack in the floor of my ribs, and I am afraid of what is going to come up out of it." She reached across the table. She did not take his hand. She put her hand flat on the wood, palm down, close enough to his hand that if he chose to move his own hand half an inch to the left, they would be touching. He did not move his hand. Neither did she. They sat like that for a long time. He did not know it yet. But that was the moment he stopped being able to marry Seraphina Ashcroft. The message came on the 5th morning. Beta Rorick brought it himself, which was already wrong, because Beta Rorick did not deliver messages. Rorick was the second wolf of the pack. Rorick had 100 men who delivered messages to him. If Rorick was walking a scroll into the king's study in person before breakfast, the scroll was on fire. Draven took one look at his Beta's face and stood up from the desk. "Speak, sit down, my king. Speak, Rorick, sit down." Rorick was 38 years old, 2 inches taller than Draven, 2 shades, darker in the hair, same grey eyes, same jawline. If a stranger had seen them stand together in a market, the stranger would have said brothers. No one had ever said it out loud. Draven sat down. Rorick put the scroll on the desk. Black wax seal. Ashcroft rose, cracked open. Because Rorick's men had cracked it open at the northern watchtower 6 hours ago. The bird had been shot down over the Ironmoor forest. A black hawk, Ashcroft courier bird, flying not toward Ashcroft, but away from it, toward a name on the 3rd line of the scroll that Draven had never wanted to see. He read the scroll, he read it again, he read it a 3rd time. He set it down very carefully on the desks, as if it were made of thin glass, as if a rough hand would break it. He looked up. "Read it to me, Rorick, my king. You have read it. Read it to me, out loud, so that I hear it in a voice that is not mine." Rorick picked up the scroll. Rorick read, "To our loyal friend in the Ironmoor court. 3 months after the wedding, and not 1 day sooner. The tincture is in the blue jar under the 3rd stone of the herb garden. 2 drops in the evening cup, no more. He will feel weak by the 2nd month. He will be dead by the 4th. His seed will not take before then. I have seen to it in the wedding cup. The regency will pass to me as widow, and to my father as guardian of the northern banners. You will be rewarded as we discussed." First this, Seraphina, silence. Draven Wolfsbane sat very still. His breathing did not change. His jaw did not lock. His hands did not close. Because there is a place past rage where the body goes quiet, and the mind goes clean, and every decision the man is about to make in the next 5 minutes has already been made. He picked up the scroll. He held it over the candle on his desk. He watched the black wax bubble and the paper curl and the words crisp into ash. All of it, every letter, every threat, every calm, considered promise to poison him at his own wedding cup. He watched it burn all the way to his fingers, and when the heat should have hurt and did not, he understood that a very specific part of him was already gone. The part that had, 3 days ago, still been willing to marry her out of duty. That part had a name. That part had been in one of the iron boxes. That part was apparently the box had just dug up. "Rorick, my king, send 3 ravens, 2, 1, to the treasurer at Frostwater Vault. Every asset held jointly with House Ashcroft is to be moved this morning. Not tomorrow, this morning, into the sovereign chests at Ironmoor. 2, to King Alaric Ashcroft, personally, at Caprivale. The wedding is cancelled, the alliance is dissolved. He may keep the bride price, he may keep the wine, he may keep he may not keep his daughter's daydream about my crown. 3, to Seraphina Ashcroft, personally, 6 words. I know, and now you know, Rorick did not move. My king, do it, my king. This is war, yes. With Ashcroft, yes, they have twice our banners in the south. Yes, you will lose the Salt Roads, yes. You will lose the Frostwater Alliance. Yes, you may lose your crown." Draven looked at his brother. His brother, though neither of them had said the word yet, "I will not lose my father's crown, Rorick. I will lose my father's crown. That is a different sentence, and it is a sentence I am ready to say." Rorick closed his eyes. Rorick opened his eyes. Rorick bowed. "Yes, my king." The ravens went out at noon. At noon and 1 minute, Aldrich Thorne knocked on the study door. Draven knew that knock. 2 sharp, 1 soft. It was the knock of a man who had a thing to say that could not wait for permission. "Come." Aldrich came in. "Shut the door." stood at the desk, did not sit. Two things, my king. Say them first. There is a thing about Beta Rorik I have carried for 30 years, and if it is not spoken today, it is going to matter tomorrow in a way that will cost you either him or your throne. And I will not have that on my ledger. Draven set both palms flat on the desk. Say it. He is your brother. Silence, my king. Say it plainly, Aldrich. He is your half-brother. He is the son of your father, Alpha King Enzo Wolfsbane, and a woman named Ivana of the harbour at Frostwater. She was not your mother. She was not your father's wife. She was a fishmonger's daughter that your father took for one summer 39 years ago, when your father was 32 and grieving his first wife, and Ivana was 24 and did not know how to say no to a king. She bore Rorik in the winter. She died in that same winter. Rorik was raised in the harbour by an aunt, and when he was 12 years old, I went and I brought him here at your father's private order, and I told he was the orphan son of a border captain, and I put him in your training yard, and he has stood at your left hand for 20 years, and not once in 20 years has he claimed one grain of what is his by blood, because I told him not to, because your father told me not to, and because the boy loved you like a brother from the first day he met you, my king, and he did not need to be told he was one to know it. Draven did not move for a very long time, he said. Very quietly, Rorik knew. Yes, my king, how long? Since he was 12, he watched me be crowned. Yes, he stood on top of the honor guard. He asked to stand there. He has taken orders from me for 20 years. He has taken orders from his king for 20 years, which is not the same thing, and which is why he has taken them without a single complaint. Draven stood up. He walked to the window. He looked out at the courtyard where he had, at 14, watched a man's head come off. He looked at the same flagstones, the same drain, the same iron rings in the wall where they had tied the man's hands, he thought. My father took one summer. My father took a fishmonger's daughter, and my father took a border alpha's head. My father took, and everything I have ever thought of as mine is really just a pile of things my father took. He pressed his hand flat against the cold stone of the window frame. Aldrich, my king, you said two things. Yes. The second, the old man drew a slow breath. The second, my king, will keep, until this evening, when you have had time with the first. Aldrich, please, my king. Draven turned. He looked at Aldrich Thorn. 20 years of oath, 2 secrets on his back, and a face that this morning looked 10 years older than it had at dawn. This evening, then, thank you, my king. Aldrich bowed and went. Draven walked to the training yard. Rorik was there, because was always there at midday, stripped to a linen shirt, a wooden practice sword in each hand, working through the forms his father had taught him at 8, which had also been Draven's father, which they had until this hour only ever called their king. Draven crossed the yard. The soldiers scattered without being told. Rorik lowered the practice swords. The two men stood 4 paces apart in the cold spring sun. Brother, Rorik did not move. Say it again, my king, brother. Rorik let the practice swords drop into the sand. He did not weep. He was not a man who wept. He walked the 4 paces. He put his forehead against Draven's forehead, his hand at the back of Draven's neck, the old northern greeting between kin. He said, into the small space between them, I have waited to hear that word for 26 years, and I would have waited 26 more. Draven closed his eyes. I am sorry for our father, brother. Do not be sorry for him. Be better than him. That is the only apology he ever earned, and he did not live to hear it. They stood like that for a long moment. Then Rorik stepped back. Rorik picked up the practice swords. Rorik handed one to his king. Now, you just cancelled a wedding, you just started a war, and you just gained a brother. You are going to need to hit something. Come. The war came 36 hours later. It came, as Rorik had said it would, from the south. 3 border villages inside the Ironmoor territory were struck between midnight and dawn. Not burned, not sacked, struck. Precisely. The village headmen were taken from their beds. Their throats were cut on the thresholds of their own houses. A single black rose was left on each doorstep. Ashcroft's mark. A polite mark. A mark that said we could have burned the village. We chose not to. Do not mistake the choice for kindness. Mistake it for aim. At the same hour, the Frostwater Vulvult seized the joint accounts of us Wolfsbane and House Ashcroft, which meant 6,000 gold and a warehouse of southern silver were, on paper, frozen, which meant Rorick had been faster than the vault by exactly 6 hours, which meant 80% of the movable assets had already been moved north, which was the only reason the war didn't end on its first morning. By noon, 3 southern allies had sent formal apologies for their sudden inability to answer Ironmore's call. By dusk, a 4th. By the second dawn, a 5th. Draven read every letter. He did not throw one of them into the fire. He filed them. Because a king who forgot which men had abandoned him in his first hour of war was a king who repeated the mistake in his second hour. On the 3rd day, the raven from Hollow Glen came. Aldric brought it to the study himself. His face was grey. My king, how bad? 8, Ashcroft, yes, dead, all 8 of theirs. One of ours. Draven's hand tightened on the arm of the chair. Name. Aldric did not answer at once. Aldric. Name Bran, my king. Bran Thorn, my brother's son, 24 years old. Cestix sorted of the 12 I sent to Hollow Glen when you gave the order to guard the Vale House. He caught the last of the assassins at the door of Mira Vale's sick room, killed the man, took the blade under his own ribs doing it, bled out in the front room, on the floorboards. In the arms he stopped. In the arms of who? Aldric of the Lady Nara Vale, my king, who was there when the alarm was raised, who ran through the front room, though 10 men told her not to, who put her hands on the wound, who did not stop pushing on it until an hour after the boy was cold. Draven stood up, slowly. Something in him rose with him, and it did not sit back down. Where is she? In the small hall. Holden gave her clean water and clean cloth. She has been washing her hands for an hour, my king. She will not stop. She said she does not want to leave prints on any of your walls. Draven walked out of the study. He did not run. A king did not run in his own keep, even when the thing in his chest was screaming at a pitch no one else could hear. He walked to the small hall. She was at the basin under the window. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbow. Her forearms were red from the water. Her hands were shaking. There was still, under her nails, a rim of dark that Taunt of scrubbing had lifted, because the blood had gone into the beds of her nails an hour ago, and because it was going to be there for another day, and because she knew it, she looked up when he came in. She did not curtsy. My king, Nara, Bran Thorn is dead. I know. He was 24. I know. He held on to my hand at the end, and he thought I was his mother. He said, "Ma, I did it right. I did it right, Ma." And then he stopped. And I have been trying for 1 hour to remember the face of a woman I have never met, so I could put it in my own face for him at the end. And I could not do it, my king. I could not do it. So what he saw at the end was me. Not his mother, me. Just some woman he had bled to save. Draven crossed the hall. He stopped a pace from her. Nara Vale, listen to me, my king. There is no face on this earth he could have seen at the end that would have been the wrong face. Because there was a woman holding his hand. And a woman holding his hand was more than most men get. And a woman who had never met him, who held his hand anyway, is the face of every good thing this world has ever bothered to make. He did not die confused, he died held. Do you understand me? Her breath hitched. She nodded. She said, very small, my king, yes. He said something else. Before he died, he said it to me, but I do not think it was for me. I think it was for you, or for Aldric. Say it. He said, tell Uncle the debt to Corvin is paid tonight. Tell Uncle the oath is kept. Silence. She kept talking, 'cause she had held on to it for an hour, and if she did not put it down now, she was going to break. He said Corvin like a name he had known his whole life, like a name told to him at a supper table by an uncle who had drunk too much, like a name he had grown up hearing, my king. My father's name was Corvin Vale, and Bran Thorn died on my floor tonight, speaking his name. And I want to know why. Draven put his hand out. He did not touch her. He put his hand palm up on the top of the basin between them. An offer. She put her wet, cold, blood-rimmed hand in his. He closed his hand round hers, Nara. I am going to find out why, tonight. and I am going to tell you what I find, every word of it, even if it costs me. Do you hear me? Yes, my King Nara, yes. Say it, say my no you can. She looked at him. For a long moment she was silent, then she said, so quietly he had to lean in, Draven? Something in him that had been holding its breath for 22 years let it out. He sent for the court witch that evening. Her name was Old Sable. She was 79 years old. She had been in the keep since before his father was crowned. She kept a hut beside the inner ward. She did not use it. She slept on a pallet by the great hearth in the kitchen, because she said her bourbons needed the heat, and because Peg let her, and because no one in Ironmoor argued with either of them. She came into the study with a small leather satchel and a face that told him she already knew. Because news travelled in Ironmoor at the speed of a servant's footsteps, which was faster than any raven. My king? Sable? You want me to ride to Hollow Glen? Yes, tonight. Yes, to the woman, Miravale. You want me to tell you what is under her ribs? Yes, she looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were the colour of milk that had been left too long in a copper pot. My king, I do not need to ride. I do not need to ride to Hollow Glen, my king. I have been to Hollow Glen 2 months ago, on my own errand, which was to buy honey from the last apiary in that valley, which is run by a woman who was once my apprentice. I sat with Miravale for an afternoon. I held her wrist. I put my ear to her spine. I smelled her sweat. I looked at the whites of her eyes. And I have been carrying what I found for 2 months, because I did not know how to bring it into this study without dying for it. Draven went very still. Say it, my king, Sable. Say it. The old woman drew a slow breath. What? She is not sick, my king. There is nothing wrong with her spine. There is nothing wrong with her marrow. Her body is not failing. Her body is being emptied. Slowly. On a schedule. By a specific tincture that has been in her food and water, in a specific measure for a specific number of years. The silence in the study was so complete, Draven could hear the candles hiss. How many years? 20. My king. Take a season. What tincture? There is only one, my king. That does this measure. Over this length of time, it is called, in the books that keep such names, Silverbeard. It is made of 3 things. Any hedge witch can name 2 of them. The third can only be pressed from a plant that grows in one greenhouse on this continent. And that greenhouse, say it, that greenhouse, my king, was inside the private walls of your father's summer palace, which is now your summer palace. Silverband has not been made outside those walls in 40 years, and the only hands that have ever measured it into a bottle have been royal hands, or a royal hand's paid hand. Draven put both hands on the desk. He looked down at the black oak, he said, and his voice was not a voice. It was the sound a man makes when he is trying not to shatter. You are telling me my father poisoned Corvin Vale's widow. I am telling you, my king, that someone with a royal hand, or paid by one, has been dripping Silverbind into that woman's cup for 20 years. And I am telling you, it was started 3 days after Corvin Vale's head came off in your courtyard. Because I remember the day it started. Because I was in the kitchen. Because I saw the messenger come in with the sealed jar. And I did not ask. Because I was 30 years younger, and I knew what asking cost. And I have been carrying that jar in my mind for 20 years. Draven closed his eyes. Can you undo it? Yes, my king, I can. It will take a month. She will walk again. She will sit at a table again. She will hold her daughters. But she will not have back the 20 years. No one gets those back. No, my king. He opened his eyes. He walked to the wall. He walked to the black scabbard on the walls. His father's sword, crossguard of iron, grip of grey wolf hide, blade of dark steel. He took it down. He weighed it in both hands. He walked to the door of the study. He walked down the west passage. He walked into the small hall. She was sitting by the window. Her hair was down. Her hands were still red. She looked up as he came in. He did not sit. He knelt Alpha King Draven Wolfsbane, 34 years old, ruler of the northern realms. Tefton mat the flagstones of his own small hall, and he laid his father's sword across his palms, and he held it up to her. Naravale, my king, my father did not only kill your father, My father, or a hand paid by him, has been poisoning your mother for 20 years. She is not dying of illness. She is dying of my house. And the last living hand that owes a throat to yours is sitting in this room. It is mine. If you want a life for a life, take this sword. I will not lift a hand. I will not name a champion. I will kneel exactly here, and you will take what is owed, and no man in this keep will lay a finger on. Afterward, I have written. It is on my desks. Sealed. It is yours. Take the sword. She looked at him. She looked at the sword. She did not reach for it. She stood up. She walked to him. She knelt down in front of him, on the same flagstones, so that they were the same height, so that his eyes and her eyes were level. She put her hand on the flat of the blade. She pushed it down, gently, onto the floor between them, she said, and her voice was the steadiest thing in the keep. Draven Wolfsbane, I do not want your blood. I want my mother's life. And I want to know who is left. He looked at her. Who is left? The tincture, you said. Silverbind. Someone has been dripping it into her cup for 20 years. That someone is still alive, Draven, because dead men do not drip. So I do not want your throat. I want the throat that is still pouring. Do you understand me? He understood her. He understood her all the way down to the floor of his ribs, where a box he did not remember burying had just come open. He said, Then we go find them together. She said yes. King Alaric Ashcroft's reply came 3 days after Bran Thorn was put in the ground. It arrived on a white raven with a red ribbon, which was the old northern way, which meant, in the language a 14-year-old boy had once been taught to read at his father's knee, parley, neutral ground, no blades drawn, no wolves changed. The kind of invitation a king sent when he wanted to look you in the eye and lie to you across a table. The neutral ground was grey hollow, a grey stone hall 2 days right south of Ironmoor, neither Ashcroft nor Wolfsbane, held for 8 generations by a small house of scholars who ran the place as an inn and asked only that the guests not bleed on the tapestries. Zvaldric read the scroll twice. Aldric said, It is a trap, my king. Draven said, Yes, you are going anyway. Yes, with her. Yes, my king, Aldric. If I leave her here, they send 12 more brands. If I take her with me, I have her where my own hand can reach her. There is no third door. There is only which trap I walk into with my eyes open. Aldric closed his eyes. Aldric opened them. Aldric said, Then I ride at your left, Rorik at your right, Sable in the wagon behind, 12 of the 12th guard around her. And you do not eat a crumb of anything Alaric Ashcroft's hand has touched, agreed. Nora did not argue about going. Nora had stopped arguing about the small things days ago. Nora had, Draven noticed, stopped calling him my king in private altogether. She still used the words in front of the steward and the guard. When the door was closed, she called him Draven. And when the thing in his chest heard the 2 syllables in her mouth, it lay down flat, the way an old dog lies down flat when it has finally found its own hearth. They rode out at dawn, 20 riders, 1 wagon, 1 small carved chest of silver, sent as a gift to the neutral house, because even in war there were manners. Nara rode a grey mare Rorik had picked for her personally. She rode it like she had been born on a mule's back, which she had. She did not complain about the cold. She did not complain about the pace. On the second night she cleaned her own tack by the fire, and Aldric watched her do it, and Aldric said, into the dark to no one in particular, Corvin's hands. Down to the knuckles, Draven heard him. Draven did not speak, because there was a thing rising in his chest that he did not yet have a word for, and he did not want to spend the word on the wrong sentence. Grey Hollow met them at midday on the 3rd day. Grey walls, grey street roof, grey banner with a black will on it. King Alaric Ashcroft stood on the front steps in a black cloak lined on with silver fox, 62 years old, pale, smiling, the smile of a man who had rehearsed his smile in a mirror, and was still not certain it fit, behind him, on the top step, in a gown the colour of arterial blood, was Princess Seraphina Ashcroft, 28, beautiful in the way a well-forged blade was beautiful, cheekbones like a promise, mouth like a receipt. She looked at Draven and she smiled, and the smile did not reach any part of her face above the teeth. Then she looked at Nara. She looked at Nara for a long time. She said, sweet as poured cream. So this is the housemaid. Nara did not lower her eyes. So this is the bride. Seraphina's smile widened by exactly the width of a knife. Not anymore, apparently. Apparently, you must be very good at what you do. I am. I clean floors, my lady. Would you like a demonstration? Rorik coughed into his fist. Aldrich did not cough. Aldrich never coughed. Alaric Ashcroft stepped smoothly between them. Alaric Ashcroft had spent 40 years stepping smoothly between things. Alpha King. Welcome to Grey Hollow. Let us not have blood on the front steps. Let us have wine on the back terrace. There is much to discuss. Draven inclined his head 1 degree, which was the least he could give and still be inside the walls of a parley. He offered Nara his arm, because a king entering a hostile hall with his chosen woman on his arm was making a statement no scroll could make. Nara took his arm. Her fingers did not shake. They went in. Supper was pheasant. Supper was wine. Supper was 8 hours of Alaric Ashcroft pouring and telling anecdotes about Draven's father and complimenting Nara's hair and asking after Aldrich's health. 8 hours of a man performing the shape of a father-in-law who had been mildly inconvenienced by the loss of an alliance and was now, over the pheasant, making his peace with it. Draven let him... Because Draven was 34, not 14. Because Draven had eaten nothing from the shared platters. Because Draven had watched Alaric's hands the way a wolf watches a snake's tail. In the 5th hour, Seraphina had left the room. To rest, she had said. Only for a moment, her head. The wine. She had smiled at Nara as she went. She had brushed her fingertips against her shoulder as she passed. Casual. Sisterly. A gesture no one at that table but Draven had catalogued. He had watched Seraphina's hand. Seraphina's hand had touched Nara's shoulder for less than 1 second. Seraphina's hand had left a small dark mark on the pale wool of Nara's dress. Ink, or dust, or scent. Something that another hand, later, would follow like a hound follows a scent trail through a dark corridor. He had not said a word. He had waited. He had waited until supper was ending. He had waited until Nara had risen to walk with him to the guest wing. He had waited until they were in the corridor, and in the corridor he had said quietly into her hair, "Do not go into your chamber. Come into mine now. Do not turn your head. Do not slow your step," she had said into his shoulder, not slowing. How bad, very. How long have you known? Since the 5th hour, and you waited. Because I wanted to see who came for you. They had reached his chamber. He had opened the door. He had put her inside. He had closed the door. He had drawn the bar. He had turned. That was when the corridor screamed. Not Nara. Nara was inside. Behind him. Safe as she could be, the scream came from the guest wing on the other side of the hall, where Nara's chamber was, where a woman in Nara's dress and Nara's height and Nara's dark hair, who had been sent to the chamber 10 minutes ago by Aldrich, precisely because Aldrich Thorn did not need a king to tell him what a smear of ink on a shoulder meant, had just been taken by 3 hooded men through her own window. Draven had planned for it. Draven had planned for a decoy in that chamber. Draven had not planned for the second thing, which was that the 3 hooded men had not come alone, which was that a 4th man, in the dark of the corridor, had waited until Draven turned toward the scream, had slipped a small wax-sealed vial into the shared water pitcher on the sideboard 3 doors down, had walked away before any wolf in the hall could sniff him, which meant that whatever happened in the next hour, someone in Draven's own party was going to drink from that pitcher before morning. Draven did not know about the vial. Not yet. Draven only knew about the scream. He did what an Alpha King does when his guard has been broken inside a neutral hall. He turned. He drew his father's sword. He looked at Nara through the door he had just barred. "Do not open this door for any voice but mine, and if my voice comes back wrong, do not open it then either," she said. "Draven," he said. "I know." He unbarred the door long enough to say, "I love you," and he barred it again before she could answer. Because there are some sentences a man says out loud once in his life and does not need an answer for. He needs only to have said them before he goes into the corridor. Then he went into the corridor. Rorik was already there. Rorik had come from the terrace at a dead run, and Rorik had a blade in each hand. Aldrich was already there. Aldrich had come from the guard station, and Aldrich had his short sword drawn, and his face was the face of a man who had been waiting 60 years of this fight. Guestwing. Nara's chamber. They took the decoy. They think they took her. They will realize their mistake within an hour. When they do, they come back for the real one, which is why she stays behind my door, and why we go now. They went. The cellar of Grey Hollow was older than the hall above it, 3 stories down, cut into the bedrock, cold in a way that got into the bones and stayed there. The neutral house kept its wine here, and its salt, and in a small carved cell behind a false wine rack that the scholars did not officially know about, a set of iron rings on the wall that had been used over 8 generations for questions that could not be asked in daylight. Alaric Ashcroft's men had put the decoy in that cell. They had not yet realized she was not Nara. They were about to. Draven and Rorink and Aldrich came down the stone stair one at a time, silent, blades low. The scholar who ran the cellar, a small nervous man named Wren, stood at the bottom of the stair with his hands up and his face the color of unbaked dough. My king. My king. I did not know. They said they were your men. They said, Rorrik put a hand on Wren's shoulder. Not hard. Just there. Wren, go up. Get to the kitchen. Tell no one what you saw. Live. Wren went up. They went down. The false wine rack was already open. Because whoever had gone in had not bothered to close it behind them. Because they had believed they had all night. Because in their own minds they had already won. Draven sniffed through the opening. The cell beyond was small. 2 torches, 1 wooden table, iron rings on the wall, a woman in a pale wool dress hanging from the rings, head down, dark hair over her face, 2 men in hoods flanking her, one holding a small clay bowl, one holding a knife. The one with the bowl said, without looking up, She has not answered any of my questions, Your Highness, but she also has not said her own name once, which is either courage or brain damage. Behind the 2 hooded men, in the corner, in a chair, sat Princess Seraphina Ashcroft, not in the red gown anymore, in a plain black riding dress, hair pinned tight, face washed of paint. She looked in that plain black dress, 10 years older and 20 years harder. She looked, Draven thought, like her father, which was the last thing in this cell he had expected to think. She saw him. She did not startle. She had a small crossbow in her lap, loaded. Wound. Pointed vaguely at the woman on the wall. She said, pleasantly, Alpha King, you came faster than I calculated, which is a compliment. Sit down, let us finish this. Draven did not sit. Let the woman go. I will, when she tells me her name. Because I have a growing suspicion, my dear former betrothed, that the woman on my wall is not the woman you came to save. The woman on the wall lifted her head. It was not Nara. It was a woman about Nara's age, and Nara's height, with Nara's colouring, who worked in the kitchen at Grey Hollow, and who Aldrich had paid 3 gold pieces to put on Nara's dress, and walk into Nara's chamber and hold still. She looked at Draven. She was terrified. She was not weeping. She'd had, Draven noted, real courage, Aldrich said from behind Draven's shoulder. Well done, Martyr. You will eat like a lord for a year, Seraphina laughed. Small, dry laugh. Almost affectionate. Oh, well played, old wolf. Well played. You always were so smart. Sword in that keep. My father used to say so. She stood. She was still holding the crossbow. She was, Draven suddenly noticed, not pointing it at Martyr anymore. She was pointing it at his chest, but the trap was never the cellar, Alpha King. The trap was the corridor, and the trap was not for her. The trap was always for you. Draven's father's sword was already up. Then loose. The bolt came fast. The bolt came fast. Not fast enough, because Aldrich Thorne, 68 years old, had spent 40 years standing at the left shoulder of 2 Alpha Kings, and Aldrich Thorne had, in his last true year of his last true service, still been faster than a crossbow bolt across 10 feet of cellar. Aldrich stepped in front of Draven. The bolt took him in the chest, below the collarbone, to the left of the sternum, deep. The point came out of his back. Aldrich did not fall at once. Aldrich turned his head, slowly. He looked at Draven. His grey eyes were clear, very clear, as if a fog he had been carrying for a long time had just, in this moment, lifted, my king. I have been standing between wolves and their father's mistakes for 20 years. I am tired. Let me Sivant caught him as he fell. Rorik was already moving. Rorik was across the cell in 2 strides. Rorik took the crossbow out of Serapha's hands, as if she were a child holding a knife at supper. Rorik put his own blade against her throat. He said into her ear very softly, "Do not move, princess. Do not breathe hard, because I loved that man, and I am half a heartbeat from doing a thing that a beta of Ironmoor is not supposed to do inside a neutral hall." She did not move. She was, Draven saw, not smiling anymore. The other 2 men in hoods put down their bowl and their knife and their hands and got on their knees. Because a cell that had just contained a king's sword and a beta's blade and an old man's dying breath was not a cell where hoods stayed on much longer. Draven laid Aldrich down on the stone floor. He put his own cloak under Aldrich's head. Sable is upstairs. Sable can, no, my king, Aldrich, no. Listen, please, because I have the second thing I owed you. From that morning in the study, and I did not think I would have to say it here. Draven leaned close. Say it to your father Corvin, Nara's father, yes. He was, what, Aldrich? He was my oath brother, my king, on a summer sworn under a white oak 42 years ago, before there was an Ironmoor for me to serve, before that Wolfsbane throne for me to guard, before I ever knelt to your father. I knelt first, in the woods, to a boy named Corvin Vale, and he knelt to me. And we swore if one of us dies, the other one raises the children. Draven closed his eyes. Aldrich kept going. Because Aldrich did not have long. That is why I sent the hawk that night. That is why I put her in the west wing a year ago. That is why I watched the corridor. That is why I never told you until I was sure of you. Because I had one duty left, my king. And it was not to a throne, it was to a boy in a white oak 42 years ago, and now that duty is discharged, because I have watched you look at her, and I know what her father would have said about the way you look at her, and he would have said, that one, Aldrich, that one will do." Draven's tears came without his permission. "Aldrich, do not go yet, my king. Yes, tell her. Not now. Later, when she is old and there are children on her floor. Tell her that her father was loved. Tell her that he was not just an alpha and a names in a scroll. Tell her that a boy in a wood loved him first. And that boy carried him, in one way or another, for 42 years. And that boy is finally putting him down. I will tell her." "Good." Aldrich closed his eyes. Aldrich did not open them again. There is a grief so old that it does not make a sound. It only sits down beside you and waits. It sat outside Draven then. It sat down on the xalt stone of that Satsler. It put its hand on his shoulder. And it waited. It said very quietly from the corner, "My king." Draven did not look up. "Rorik, what do you want done with the princess?" Draven laid Aldrich's hand across Aldrich's chest. He stood up. He turned. Seraphita Ashcroft was still under Rorik's blade. Her chin was up. Her eyes were dry. She had Draven's saw already priced the next hour and decided what she was willing to pay. Draven walked to her, he said, very quietly. "Tell me who has been paying the poisoner in Hollow Glen." Her eyes moved. Just a flicker. "I do not know, Seraphina. I do not know, Alpha King." "That is the truth. My father knows I do not." "Then say your father's name." She did not speak. Draven waited. He was very good at waiting. His father had taught him, she said at last. "Bitter. My father, louder, my father, Alpha King Alaric Ashcroft, has paid a hand in your kitchens for 20 years to keep a certain woman in a certain valley from ever standing upright again. There, is that what you came to hear?" Yes, he turned. He walked out of the cell. He walked up the stone stair. He walked into the great hall of Grey Hollow, where Alaric Ashcroft was standing by the terrace door, calmly pouring a fresh cup of wine, as if nothing at all had happened 3 floors below. Alaric heard the boots. Alaric turned. Alaric saw Draven's face. Alaric set down the cup. "Draw, Elfcuff King. Neutral ground. You broke it in the cellar. You broke it when you sent your daughter into the wall, behind my back, with a crossbow. You broke it when you signed a paper 20 years ago to poison a widow in her own kitchen. There is no neutral ground left in this house. There is only the length of my father's sword between you and me." Draw. Alaric's hand went to his hip. Alaric was 62. Alaric had not drawn a blade in earnest in 19 years. Alaric had trained every one of those years all the same. Because a king who let his sword rust was a king who died in his sleep, Alaric drew. The steel came out clean. They fought in the great hall of Grey Hollow, under the 8 generations of tapestries, over the long oak table where they had drunk together an hour before, around the fire, past the chairs, blade against blade, wolf against fought wolf, old man against younger man, guilt against reckoning. It was not a long fight, because Alaric Ashcroft was good, but he was tired, and because Draven Wolfsbane, for the first time in his adult life, was fighting with something in him that had a name he had already said out loud in a corridor upstairs. And a man who is fighting for a named thing is faster than a man who is fighting only for himself. Draven took Alaric's blade at the 3rd pass. Not his life, his blade. He struck the pommel out of the older man's hands. The sword went across the hall, rang against the stone hearth, skittered under the table. Alaric stood empty-handed, panting, waiting. Draven put the point of his father's sword under Alaric's chin. Close enough that Alaric could feel the cold coming off the steel, he said very quietly, very clearly, so the whole hall could hear him, so the servants who had stopped in the doorways could hear him, so the herald who had already begun scribbling for the ride back to Capri Vale could hear him, Alaric Ashcroft. On this floor, in this hour, before these witnesses, do you confess that you have for 20 years paid a hand within Ironmore to poison Mira Vale, widow of Alpha Corvinvale of Hollow Glen? Yes or no? Alaric closed his eyes. Alaric opened his eyes. Yes. Do you confess that you conspired with my father, the late Alpha King Enzo Wolfsbane, to bring false charges of treason against Alpha Corvin Vale, in order to seize the trade of the Hollow Glen Valley and split it between our 2 houses? Yes. Do you confess that you sent your daughter Seraphina to my court, under a marriage contract, with the intention that she would, after our wedding, poison me and rule Ironmore as regent? Alaric hesitated. Draven did not press the blade forward. Draven only waited. Yes. Draven took the sword away from Alaric's chin. He stepped back. He did not lower the blade all the way. He rested the point on the stone floor between his boots. You will live. Alaric opened his mouth. Do not thank me. You will live, because your death is the smallest thing I can take from you. You will live in the black cells at Frostwater, for as long as your body will bear it. You will lose your crown. You will lose your ports. You will lose your daughter to a lifetime of exile past the Grey Sea, on a rock where she may write me as many letters as she likes, and I will not read any of them. You will lose these 200 gold a year that has, for 20 years, purchased a small clay jar, and the woman that jar has been poisoning for 20 years will, this time next year, be strong enough to walk into your cell and look at you. And that, old man, is the sentence. Alaric fell to his knees. Alaric did not weep. Alaric did not beg. Alaric only, very slowly, put his forehead against the stone floor of the neutral hall, which was, in the old northern way, the posture of a king who had lost his blade and knew it. Draven turned. Rook was in the doorway. Seraphina was behind him, wrists bound. 2 of the 12th guard flanked her. Rook said, "The vial, what vial? The pitcher in the corridor. 3 doors down from your chamber. I found it when we came up. Sable is upstairs with it now. Someone slipped a wax-sealed vial into the water while the corridor was screaming." Draven closed his eyes. "Who drank from it? Nobody, my king. Because do not let people drink out of pitchers I have not watched being filled. Which is why I am useful." Draven opened his eyes. He almost smiled. He did not, because there was still a dead man in a cellar. "Get Aldrich up. Wrap him in my cloak. He rides home in the wagon, not the ground. The wagon, yes, my king, and Rorik, yes, you are not just my beta anymore, I know. You are going to be sitting a lot more chairs than you used to, I know." They rode home the next morning. They rode home slowly, because there was a wagon at the center of the column, because there was in the wagon a body that had, for 68 years, refused to slow down, because a man like that got a slow ride home. Even if it cost the king a day, Nara rode beside Draven. She did not speak for the first hour. Then she said, "Draven, yes, you said something through the door." "Last night, I did. You did not wait for me to answer. I did not." "Why?" He looked at her. Because I did not want to make say it back inside a hall that might have killed you. Because a woman should not have to say a thing like that under a knife. Because I wanted the first time you said it, if you ever said it, to happen somewhere where the light was good and no one had a weapon. She looked at the road ahead of her. I love you, Draven. He looked at the road ahead of him. The light is very good. The Moon Witch of Hollow Glen was paid 3 days later, not 400 gold. 6. Because Draven Wolfsbane had a habit now of paying his father's debts at interest, Sable rode down herself. Sable rode with the last measure of the antidote she had spent 2 weeks refining in the still room. Sable rode with a letter from Nara that Mira Vale would read 3 times before she could put it down. Mira Vale sat up on the 5th day. Mira Vale stood on the 12th. Mira Vale walked on the arm of her younger daughter Isla out into the front garden of the Vale house on the 18th day, in the pale sun of a northern spring, and she smelled cedar, because it was still spring, and because the wind was from the south, and because the burnt clearing still remembered. Isla wrote to Nara that night. 2 lines. She stood, sister. She stood, and she's asked for you, and I told her you're coming home a queen, and she said, then I will need a new dress. Aldrich Thorn was buried on the 9th day, not in the crypt of the keep. He had not asked to be laid there. He had asked, in a small folded note left on the desk of his private quarters 12 years before, to be put in the ground of the meadow past the outer wall, where a stand of young oaks had grown up from acorns he had planted himself in the summer, after his own son died at sea. The son was in that ground. The wife who had died 3 years after the son was in that ground. And now Aldrich Thorn, 68 years old, was in that ground too, between the two of them. As he had always meant to be, Draven Fulfsbane dug the last shovel of dirt himself. He did not let another man do it. He put the shovel down, he knelt, he put his hand on the fresh earth. He said quietly, so only the ground could hear him, you did not have to step in front of the bolt. But I understand that you did, and I will spend the rest of my crown being the kind of king who was worth it. He did not weep. He had wept in the cellar. He had spent all of that. What he had left at the graveside was a promise, which was what Aldrich Thorn would have preferred anyway. Nara stood beside him. She did not say anything. She put one hand on his back between his shoulder blades, and she left it there for the length of the burial. And she did not take it away when he stood up. Rorik was 3 paces behind. Rorik had in his hands the wolf-head brooch. He had cut it from Aldrich's cloak that morning. He gave it to Draven at the edge of the meadow. Draven turned it in his hand. He looked at it. He looked at the fresh grave. He looked at Nara. He said, do you want it? No, my king. That is not mine to want, Rorik. I have my own cloak, and I have my own brooch. And a man who takes a dead man's oath mark to wear on his own shoulder is a man who did not understand what the oath was for. Give it to her. Draven looked at Nara. She looked at the brooch, she said, very quietly. It was my father's oath mark, too, in a way I did not know until last night. Yes, then yes, I will keep it, not to wear, to keep on my father's bench, which I am going to build again, which I am going to put in the front room of my house at Hollow Glen, which will smell like cedar again, and on that bench I will put this brooch and a candle, and I will light the candle on the first night of every new moon for the rest of my life. Draven put the brooch in her hand. Her hand closed around it. They walked back to the keep together, the 3 of them, in a line, slower than a wagon, slower than a horse, at the pace a man walks who has just put his father in the ground, which, in one way or another, all 3 of them had. The Alpha Council convened in Ironmoor a month later. Every banner of the North sent a wolf, because a king had cancelled a wedding, because as a king had fought another king in a neutral hall, because a king had, in the same season, buried his oldest sword and gained a brother. There was, in short, a great deal of business. They came, they sat, they listened. Draven stood at the head of the black oak table. Nara stood beside him, not behind, beside, which was, some of the older alphas noted quietly, a placement that had not been seen at that table in 80 years, Draven said. The Hollow Glen Valley belonged to Alpha Corvin Vale. It was taken from his house by a lie. That lie was confessed in Grey Hollow before witnesses. The valley is returned to his blood, which sits at this table tonight. In this chair, he put his hand on the back of Nara's chair. The Alphas looked at Nara Vale. Nara Vale looked back at them. I will hold Hollow Glen, in my mother's name, in my father's name, in my sister's name. Not as a wife, not as a widow, as an Alpha of my own line. I will keep my own counsel. I will keep my own guard. I will keep my own treasury. And I will keep my own hand. Silence, then, because northern wolves respect two things above all others in this world, and the first is bravery, and the second is a woman who does not need to be told twice. One Alpha put his fist on the table, then another, then 12, then all of them, which was the old northern way of saying, "Yes," Draven said, "and she stands tonight, and every night after, at the left hand of the Alpha King of Ironmoor, not as vassal, not as bride, as his equal at his own table. If any wolf in this hall objects, that wolf will speak now, or that wolf will hold his tongue until his own bones give it up." No wolf spoke. Good. Rorik leaned close to Draven's ear as the council rose. He said very softly, "That was well said, brother," Draven said. "It was mostly hers. Yes, I noticed. The wedding was on the first full moon of summer, not at Caprivale, not a marble garden, on the roof of the tallest tower of Ironmoor Keep, under a sky so clear the moon looked close enough to touch. There were no 500 guests. There were 14. There was Mira Vale in a new dress, sitting in a small carved chair that Aldrich Thorn had, in the last winter of his life, sat by his own fire and made for her. He had never told anyone he was making it. Sable had found it under a tarp in his workshop after the funeral. It was carved of cedar. It had 2 wolves and 2 roses on the back. It sat in the courtyard now, and it would sit at every table of state for the rest of Mira's life. And it would go home with her when she went. There was Isla Vale. There was Peg, there was Old Sable, there was Beta Rorik Wolfsbane, who was by that summer no longer called simply Beta. There were the 8 surviving men of the 12th Guard. There was a small stone at the base of the tower, newly cut, grey. It said in the plain northern letters that Aldrich Thorn had preferred. Here waited a wolf. Draven put a silver circlet on Nara's hair. It was not a wife's circlet, it was an Alpha's. He had had it made from the melted-down crossguard of his father's sword, because his father's sword had done its last honest work in the great hall of Grey Hollow. Because there was, he had decided, no better use for the iron of the man who had killed her father than to sit, from now until the end, on the head of the man's daughter. She put no circlet on him. She said, when the priest asked why, "He is already crowned. He does not need me for that. He needs me for the rest of it." The priest nodded. The priest said the old words. They said the old words back. Then Draven said quietly, only to her, in the pause where a king is supposed to say nothing at all. "The light is very good tonight, Nara Vale," she said. "Yes, it is, Draven Wolfsbane, and the moon over Ironmoor Keep, which had watched every king of that house rise and fall for 400 years, held its light steady on 2 faces on a rooftop, as if it wanted, this one time, to be sure it saw them clearly. Mira Vale caught her older daughter's eye across the courtyard. Mira Vale did something she had not done in 20 years. Mira Vale stood up out of her cedar chair, under her own power, on her own feet. She stood up because her daughter had just been crowned, and she was not going to greet that news sitting down. Nara saw her stand. Nara took 2 steps toward her before she remembered she was wearing a circlet, and then she took the rest of the steps anyway, and she put her arms onto Mavath's shoulders, and her mother put her arms around her back, and neither of them spoke. Because there is a kind of weeping that 2 women do, when one of them has spent 20 years lying down and the other has spent 1 year lying to a sister on a mirror in a kitchen at 3 in the morning. And that kind of weeping does not need language. Isla stood beside them. Fisla did not weep. Fisla was the youngest, and Isla had spent 3 years being the strong one in that house, and Isla had earned the right to stand there dry-eyed and watch her mother and her sister hold each other on a rooftop under a full moon. Rorik came to stand at Draven's shoulder. Rorik said very quietly, "You did the thing our father could not do, brother," Draven said. What thing? Rorik said. You made a house that people come home to. Not a house that people are dragged out of. Draven did not answer that. He did not need to. He watched Nara stand under the moon with her mother in her arms and her sister at her elbow, and he understood, for the first time in his life, why his own mother had chosen to die in a keep instead of running from it. Because a keep done right was not a cage. A keep done right was a hearth, and every wolf on this earth is only ever looking for one. If you have listened this far, then let me speak to you now. Not to Draven, not to Nara, to you. Because there is a chance, tonight, that you are sitting somewhere, and you have a bowl of something cold in your lap, and you have been telling yourself for a long time that no one is going to notice. Let me say the true thing to you. Once play before this story ends, someone is going to notice. Someone is going to walk into the room at 3 in the morning and see you, not because you asked. You did not ask. You would not ask. Someone is going to see you because there is a thing under your ribs that has been carrying a mountain for so long that even the mountain has started to bend around it. And a good soul, when a good soul finally walks past you, feels the bend in the air. Draven Wolfsbane had 200 banners. He had 3 ports. He had a treasury deep as a canyon. Not one of those things saved him. What saved him was a night when he set his crown on a kitchen stool and asked a woman on the floor about her mother. And here is a truth we do not often say out loud, so I will say it out loud now. The most powerful thing a man ever does in his life is not the thing he does with a sword. It is the thing he does when he could have walked past. He could have walked past. He could have read the hawk's message, called for a fresh horse, told the steward to give the maid a coin and put her in a hostel, and been back in Caprivale by the second dawn. He could have kept the alliance. He could have kept the 200 banners. He could have kept the 3 ports. He could have gone to his wedding and drunk the poisoned cup and never, while I was dying. He did not walk past. He stopped. He sat on a stool. He asked one question. And every good thing that came after in his life came from that one stop. Think about your own life for a minute. Not the big things, not the crown moments, the small ones. The times you almost did not stop, the times you almost did not sit down, the times a person was sitting on the floor of a kitchen you were walking through, and you almost kept walking, and you did not. You stopped, you sat, you asked. Do you remember what happened after? If you do, then you already know why this story mattered. If you do not, then here is your invitation. There is going to be a chance in the next week. There is going to be a face. There is going to be a person in your life, on your porch, at the counter of the place you buy your coffee, in the corner of the room at the family supper, and that person is going to be carrying a mountain, and no one else at the table is going to see it, and you are going to have the choice: walk past or stop sit. Ask. That is all this story is teaching us. That is all it was ever teaching us. The rest was just wolves and rain and old men keeping oaths in the woods. Aldrich Thorne, 68 years old, did not have a crown. He did not have a bride. He did not have a son of his body, not by the end. And he was, in every honest reckoning, the biggest man in this story, because he kept a promise made in a summer wood to a boy who was already dead. And he kept it for 42 years, and he did not tell anyone he was keeping it. And when the moment came, he did not step aside. That is a kind of man that is not made much anymore. But it used to be made. Your father knew men like that. Your grandfather knew men like that. Maybe you knew one once. Maybe you are one, and you did not know it until tonight. If you are, hear me. The world does not always send you a king to save. Most of the time, the world only sends you a corridor with someone else's child at the end of it, and a bolt in the air you did not see coming, and the smallest, quiet choice in the 2 seconds you have of whether to step in front of it or step aside. The men who step in front of it do not get songs. They get a stone in a meadow that says 4 words, "Here waited a wolf." And that is enough. Because those 4 words, in the mouth of the right person on the right night, will outlast every song a bard has ever written for a king now. Here is the last thing. Look around your life tonight. There is a Nara somewhere in it. There is a person who serves you your coffee and never says her back hurts. There is a person who cleans the office after you leave and never tells you her mother is sick. There is a person at the front desk of your building who has been carrying a mountain for 11 years and has never made a sound about it. You do not have to be a king to see her. You only have to look up from your own plate. Once, long enough. And if you are the invisible one tonight, if you are the one on the floor with the cold bowl, hear me. Not every corridor stays empty forever. Sometimes the door opens at 3 in the morning, and the man with the sword sits down on the cross from you, and he says, "Tell me about your mother." Sometimes an old wolf you have never met has been waiting for you, quietly, for a very long time, to walk through his gate. Stay standing, even if you have to stand into a curtsy. Stay standing. How many people around us are carrying invisible mountains right now, and what would change in our own kingdoms if you just looked up long enough to notice? If any part of this story cracked something in you tonight, good. Let it stay cracked. That is where the light gets in. Tell us in the comments. Tell us the name of your Aldrich, the old man in your life who kept an oath nobody paid him to keep. Tell us the name of your Nara, the quiet person you never noticed until you did. Tell us the name of the person on the floor of your own kitchen you have not yet gone to see. We read every one of them. And sometimes the name you write down at the bottom of a comment box at 2 in the morning is the same name that saves you when the corridor finally opens. And if this story reached you, if any of it at any point, made you set down whatever you were doing and just sit there with it, then share it with one person tonight. Not everyone. One person. The person you know is on a kitchen floor somewhere. The person you have been meaning to call for 11 months. The person who used to hold the world up for you and who nobody right now is holding up to them. Do not explain. Just send it. Let them decide what to do with it, because a story is only ever half of the work. The other half is done by the hand that passes it along, and that hand tonight is yours. Sleep well if you can, and if you cannot, then get up and walk into your own kitchen and see who is already sitting there. Somebody has been waiting for you. Go and find them.